Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Elements of Success, where we talk about alchemy for an embodied life. Today, we are here with episode 24 Your Needs Are Sacred, and we are going to be exploring the other side of shadow. So, just in case you don't know me, I'm Safriana Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide. I am a licensed clinical professional trauma counselor and a best selling author, a druidic priestess, transformational mentor. I kind of do it all. And I am here to offer the wisdom that I've accrued along the way and my experience of what I call the shadow light dance. So, we are really in the thick of the shadow light arc right now. And last time we started to explore how we integrate our shadows, how we really work with our shadows. What do shadows actually look like? So, if you tuned in for that, where did you recognize yourself on the spectrum of energetic harmony? This is something we're going to be talking about more in length, but there's neutral, unaligned, and aligned. So, have you been seeing unaligned shadows coming up, aligned shadows, neutral shadows, etc.? What did you notice without judgment? And then what came up when you reflected on what you've been taught to hide? I know for me, I have been really deep diving lately. How much I was taught to hide my emotions as a child, how much I was parentified, and how that really came up into my adult relationships where I continued to hide my feelings and withdraw. And so as we really begin to reflect on the things we've been taught to hide, we can reclaim them. We can step forward much more empowered, and we have the capacity to communicate our needs. That is what we're getting into today. So last time we named what lives in the shadow, why that matters to us. There's so many people that try to flee and run away from or escape. And we don't need that anymore. We can really reclaim these shadows and find the language of our practical needs. So remember, because so much of this series has been about internal family systems, the shadows are where your exiled parts live, and they need to have need language in order to share with us, communicate with us, so we can meet our own needs. So needs work is really shadow retrieval work, because I'm going to talk about this concept of our needs going underground, parts of ourselves going underground, exiled underground. And then we have this work that we have to do of reclaiming and retrieving them, which can feel really, really out of reach. So I want us to just start with the understanding that when our needs go unmet, or it was unsafe to have needs, whether that be in an adult relationship or looking back at our own childhood history, when our needs are unmet or we feel unsafe, they become shadows. They go underground. These needs don't vanish. We don't suddenly not need these things anymore. We just feel like we can't get them. So, what's the point of trying? Or we don't feel like it's safe to ask for them. So, we're not going to ask because we want safety. The thing is that no matter the reason that these needs went underground, no matter the reason that they were exiled, they still are there. They are still trying to express, and they come out what I call come out sideways. And when they come out sideways, right, it looks like self-sabotage. It looks like resenting ourselves or others, projecting our feelings at other people, numbing and dissociating, passive aggressiveness, the list goes on. Because we're still trying to meet needs for connection and safety and validation and all other manners of human desires that we have. But when these needs come out sideways, we end up saying things we don't mean, we do things that we don't mean or regret, and we sabotage our own success. All in the name ultimately of trying to get a need met that was never able to be fully voiced. So every time that you excavate a voice and voice a need that you are retrieving a part of yourself from the dark. Now, what I want to say here about the things going sideways and saying things we don't mean and sabotaging our own success and all of that, I want to caveat here. A, we are still responsible for the things that we said, even if we didn't mean them. We're still responsible for the things that we do, even if we realize after doing it that it wasn't authentic to us. So our ownership is still very, very valid here, very, very important. And sometimes, projection and resentment and passive aggressiveness are not coming from an unspoken need. They're coming from a limiting belief or a story or past patterns and behaviors. So ownership is still important. We need to be able to own our needs. We need to be able to own when our unmet needs or other circumstances are causing us to lash out. Those are all important pieces in the journey, because if we dismiss ownership, we're not going to find ourselves able to be in happy, healthy relationships. So, again, every time that you voice a need, you're retrieving a part of yourself from the dark. And we're going to get into all of the nuance of this. So, first off, your need is not a weakness. Unfortunately, we currently live in a culture that very widely treats needing things as a character flaw. It's neediness, it's dependence, it's a burden. We all have needs. We absolutely all have needs. And oftentimes the people's needs who are downplayed or dismissed are women, they're people of color, they're children. And so it is absolutely a truth that right now in our society, men's needs are prioritized and centered more than anyone else's needs. And interestingly enough, the needs of the rich are centered more than the needs of the underprivileged. And so needs are needs. We all have them, but we live in a culture that shames needs for people who actually have more genuine need. So I just want to put that out there. There's all this stuff to untangle, all of these stories to dismiss, and you are allowed to have needs. So ultimately, needs are a language that your soul uses to tell you what it came here for. So I need to write. Like, I legitimately need to write. If I don't, I start to lose my sense of self completely and utterly. I need to be out in nature. I think we all do, but I certainly need to be out in nature because I'm a druid and that's what I came here to do and be, as a person who connects with the natural world. I need connection. I'm here to be in connection with not all other human beings. I'd love that. That'd be cool. But also overwhelming when there's billions. But like, I'm here for connection, for really deep holding space with other people. So, what do you know you need, or you feel like you are no longer yourself? That's a really important question here. Self acceptance, which we explored, more in the ownership arc, includes your needs and desires, accepting that you have a desire, accepting that you have a need. This is a huge thing. So many of us think that we're bad for wanting and needing something. And we'll get into a little bit of the difference between wants and needs, but we often lump them together too. If I want something, if I need something, if I desire something, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm shameful, I should feel guilty, I'm a burden, I'm needy, etc. The story continues. So, really looping back to self acceptance, to anchoring into the power of who you are and who you came here to be, the essence of who you came here to be, all of that is important work in this. You can't welcome your whole self home while you're continuing to exile what you actually need. So, we have talked about the shadow light dance before, and we'll continue to talk about it. But this infinity symbol, right? If you cut yourself off half of that infinity symbol, you're going to get stuck in the loop of the other side. So it's really important that we embrace the wholeness of who we are, shadow and light, so that we can do what is ours to do. And here's what I really, really want you to remember here. The first parts of us that go into hiding are usually or often the parts of us that our soul came here to express. It's just that when those parts don't get their needs met, they can't get their needs met, they go into exile. An early example of this for me, which I've really only recently started to really be able to re-embrace, is my writer. My writer was so shamed and so torn down by family members and loved ones and even teachers that I started to exile that part. I put her away. I shoved her down to the bottom and I said, we're not allowed to pursue that. That's foolish. That's selfish. That's this. All of these stories that reflected to me. So the most fragile parts in a way. And I don't mean fragile as an insult, but the most tender to criticism, especially when we're young, are often the parts of us that felt like what we came here to do, our creativity, our expression, the fullness of us and our light, right? So when a part of us cannot get that need met and it's really essential to who we are, very often that's the one that gets shoved down first to try to protect us from the pain of rejection. So please be kind and gentle to these exiled parts as you are beginning this work. So, sourcing and requesting, both of these are important. We're going to talk about both of them. So, there's still a really crucial difference between them, but we need both. So, meeting your own needs versus having your needs met by others. Sourcing, we're going to call it here, is taking responsibility for identifying and tending your own needs, your own need for rest, your own need for nourishment, your creative expression, your spiritual practice, your creativity, your schedule. Like I could go on, all of the things that you actually have inside what's called your circle of control, what you can actually choose, right? And you can choose to take care of yourself. You can choose to show up for yourself with love and compassion and meet your basic needs. You can meet your basic needs for connection with yourself. You can have quality time with yourself. You can have sensual and pleasure time with yourself, right? That's sourcing. And this is self ownership in action. Requesting is clearly asking another person for something that you need in a relationship, support, presence, accountability, space, etc. So this is relational ownership. Hey, would you be willing to do this with me? I'd love to do this. Would you like to join me? Right? Clear invitations with the knowing that someone has full permission to say no. That is a request. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But the shadow pattern really emerges, and this is unaligned shadow pattern when we refuse to do either. We're not meeting our own needs and we're not really clearly making requests. Instead, we might make demands, we might be passive aggressive. When those needs go unspoken or unmet, they come out sideways. So rather than requesting clearly, hey, I'd really love quality time with you, is that something we can schedule? Can we get that time blocked away? We might instead say things like, we never spend time together. What's going on with that? Our relationship's falling apart, right? So we end up kind of getting into these negative stories and spirals often when ideally first we're able to take the action of actually making a request. But even better, the first step should be sourcing from within us. Is this something I can meet my own need for first? If the answer is no or only partially, then it might be time to go make requests. One of the shadow patterns people get stuck in is over relying on other people to meet their needs. That is something that we really want to take ownership for, and we really want to be careful to not, as adults, put the brunt of labor on another adult to meet our needs. So again, source first, then get clear and make a request of what you need outside of you. So when we're excavating our needs, we want to get into the subtle difference between wants and needs. They're very related, I think, and neither is like better or worse or anything like that. It's just slightly different things. So look at it this way. Wants live more on the surface. I want to go take a nap. I want to go shop for clothes. I want to hang out with my friend. Needs are the root of those things. So I want to take a nap. The need is rest. I want to go hang out with my friends. The need is connection, right? I want to go shopping for clothes. The need might be for entertainment there or for distraction, because right now I certainly don't need any new clothes. But I want to quit my job, for example, could be rooted in a need for autonomy, rest, or creative expression. So your need to go take a nap might be different than my need to take a nap. But why? I want them to text me back. Might be rooted in a need for validation, connection, and safety. I want them to text me back is not a need. You don't need them to text you back, right? But you really want it. The practice is to notice the surface level want and then ask, what is the deeper need beneath that? Like, what are you actually hungry for? And it usually is more of these value words: connection, clarity, rest, rejuvenation, these sort of one shot words or very short phrases: creative expression, autonomy, etc. These are the underlying needs beneath what we want in the moment. So, getting curious about your wants: are there trends? Are there trends to your wants that really show you there's something deeper underneath for you to explore? So when you learn to excavate the need that's underneath the want, you open to more pathways to actually getting it met instead of fixating on a surface level solution. So for example, going back to I want them to text me back. That is so often coming from a deep desire for social validation, for feeling like we need someone to show us we're okay, we're safe, we're not going to be abandoned. What we really need is safety. We need connection. We need validation of ourself, because if we can't validate ourselves, no one else outside of us can validate that either. So there's some sourcing that needs to happen first in this situation. And then maybe there's a request that can be made of another person. But I want them to text me back is so often like an anxious response, right? I don't know how they're feeling about me because they're not texting me back. Okay, well, do you feel okay in yourself? Or are you reaching for that outside validation when you really, really need to deeply care for yourself? So, again, the lesson here is to source first. Look at your want, see the need underneath. Can you source that need first? And then maybe you go out and make a request. So, if you're really wanting connection, for example, and this one person isn't texting you back, can you connect with yourself? Can you connect with someone else? Can you line up future opportunities for connection, right? Invitations. How can we be flexible with the underlying need? And then shelving. Versus suppressing. I've talked about this in other words before, and I'm approaching it from a different angle here. So part of this excavation work is recognizing the difference between temporarily needing to shelve a need versus actually like suppressing a need. So I have talked about dissociation before, and how dissociation is sort of like when we pop off an emotional something. We're having a big emotional response to an input, and we do not genuinely have the capacity, the means, the time, the whatever to handle it right now. So we temporarily dissociate that emotion, handle the situation in front of us, and then ideally later we reintegrate that emotion. We bring it back into the system and we process it, and all is well. So shelving is very similar. It's this idea that, okay, I have identified a need. I honor that it's real. I am going to make a conscious choice to come back to this when I have the resources. And then I will actually listen to myself and follow through. So this is sort of like popping off, temporarily dissociating something, shelving it for a moment, knowing we'll come back to it. So if you're like, I really have a need, I'll just use a personal example. I really have a need to be vital in my body, to feel good in my skin, to really feel as healthy as I am capable of feeling, because I want to be able to do what I'm here to do for a long time. So I need to be healthy to do that. If I recognize, oh, I really need this nutritional support, and it's going to take me a while to come around to having the full resources to routinely have this nutritional support. I'm consciously choosing to shelve having it right now so I can get the things in a row to make that happen. That's an example where it's like, okay, I can't make this happen right this second. I need to do this, this, this. So I'm going to put the need right here on the shelf, and I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to come back to it. I am going to come back to it. That is the key. Your nervous system rebels when you lie to yourself. When you tell yourself you're going to show up for you and then you do not, you erode your own self-trust. We have all done this. We have all made ourselves a promise. We have drawn an internal boundary and then we have completely let it go and ultimately failed ourselves, failed to show up for ourselves, right? Just calling it what it is. That is why it is essential when we are temporarily dissociating something or we are shelving it that it is temporary, that we promise we will come back and we actually do. That is how we rebuild nervous system safety. Suppression, much like dissociation, is when the need gets shoved down and it never gets revisited. It does not disappear, it simply builds pressure until it bursts out or it turns inward. Suppressing our needs leads to so much resentment of ourselves and others. We feel miserable in our lives. We wonder why we're doing what we're doing, and it doesn't feel good. So it's okay to shelve something. It's okay to say, I can't meet this need right this second, but I kind of have an idea how, and I'm going to come back to it later and then actually do that. It is an entirely different process when we continue to shove it down and away. And eventually it comes screaming out from the void, from the basement. I'll share that metaphor. And we don't know what to do. So, all of these emotions, these memories, these needs, all of the things that we've explored, when we shove them away and we repress them, suppress them, dissociate them, it's like we're shoving shoe boxes in a basement. So imagine there's all kinds of different sizes and shapes of basement in the world, first of all. So your basement might be able to hold more than your neighbor's basement. Your basement might be able to hold less than your neighbor's basement. There's no right or wrong of the basement size. But you dissociate some emotions, shoebox goes in the basement. You exile some needs, you keep suppressing them down, shoebox goes in the basement. You dissociate another emotion, you dissociate another desire, you shove down another need. All of these go in the basement, shoved in their dark little shoeboxes. And eventually you go to shove one more thing in that you don't want to look at, and the basement is full, and the boxes start tumbling out. And this is essentially what happens to people when we press everything down. The pressure builds, and we end up having mental breakdowns. We end up in deep depressions. We end up profoundly burnt out. So rather than suppressing, rather than dissociating, again, temporary shelving or temporary popping off of things with the promise we are going to bring them back. We're going to open that shoebox. We're going to sort through it. We're going to see what needs to stay, what needs to go. And then we get to reuse the shoebox for something else in the future instead of shoving it in the basement. So all of this to say, honest excavation of our needs really means being willing to notice what we have been shelving indefinitely, because eventually shelving becomes suppression if we don't pick the items back up off the shelf. So let's just talk about this is a 30,000 foot view. This is just high level. We could go so deep into all of the domains of what this looks like, but I don't want to pile any more on than we already do, right? This is a very full series. But let's just think of these sort of four basic pillars of need, and you can branch off and kind of brainstorm from here. But we'll call it our basic needs: physical, emotional, spiritual, creative. Could also call that intellectual. But physical needs might look like your need for rest, nourishment, movement, pleasure, sensory comfort, touch, etc. We all need shelter. We all need rest. We all need food. We all need movement. We all need water. These are physical needs. We do need sensory comfort and touch in some way, shape, or form. Like we are pretty universal as a species when it comes to our physical needs. The body needs what it needs. Now, our emotional needs are where it really might start to vary, but most of us, arguably all of us, need to be connected with other living beings. We might need autonomy, expression, safety, being witnessed, belonging, you know, what we really desire on emotional level, that feeling of satisfaction that comes from a well-lived life. Spiritual needs might look like meaning and purpose or transcendence, belonging to something bigger than us. Rituals. I have a spiritual need for quiet time and just connection to myself. Creative needs, things like expression, inspiration, beauty, play, creating or making, and the freedom to create without creating a product. So just again, this represents literally the barest surface of what needs might be. So what are your pillars of need? What are your sorts of categories of need? What is very obvious to you that you do need versus things that are being suppressed? Many, many, many of us were taught that we only need our physical needs met. We just need food, shelter, water, sleep. But oh my gosh, there's so much more to it than that. And a lot of times our physical needs don't even get met because of societal narratives or whatever else. So many of our other needs are living in the shadow, and you have the capacity. You get to go in to excavate those. That is the exciting news. We're returning to pleasure as information. You know that this has been a series wide discussion. Pleasure is so important. And of course, pleasure does not just mean sexual pleasure. In our work with creative fire, with seasonal wisdom, with emotional rhythms, we have come back to pleasure as an important piece of information again and again. Pleasure gives you so much information about your authentic needs. What genuinely feels good in your body really ends up pointing you towards what you might actually need out in the world, not what you were taught to want. We have been taught to want certain things. And I find 90% of the time that what wants we have been fed don't land for the people that they've been fed to. So it's also not what you think you should need, right? I've really realized in my own journey over this last year to 3 years how much I don't actually need what I was told I should need. A big house, potentially multiple vehicles, this much money in the bank, etc. I need to be able to be me. I need to be able to be self-expressed. The rest we figure out as we go. So what do you actually need? Not what you think, not what other people have told you, but what do you? So what is your system actually asking for? And this is where we get to really interview parts of us, get to know the signals that are coming through. When I really notice that I am energetically dragging, I'm feeling so tired in my body. Maybe I'm having that cramp in the top of my right foot that tells me I'm rushing around too much. If I listen to that cramp and the exhaustion and the tiredness and I really tune in, I go, oh, I need more spaciousness. I need more freedom. I need more time. Okay, how can I meet those needs? How do I source that from within myself? So, what's your system actually asking for? Have these conversations. But when pleasure has been pushed into shadow through shame, through purity culture, or the belief that you have not earned your pleasure, reclaiming it itself is an act of needs retrieval because pleasure is a need. Pleasure gives us so much joy in life and a sense of like, oh, yes, this is why I need to keep being alive and keep moving forward. Without enjoyment, without pleasure, it's so easy to spin into depression. So use your pleasure as a guidepost towards what might actually be underlying needs. Now, I do want to put a caveat here. Obsessively focusing on pleasure, feeling like you need a hedonistic life all the time, feeling like you need sex all the time, feeling like you need to eat a certain food that's really tasty all the time, these can be cover-ups for real underlying needs. So just a little invitation there. Yes, your pleasure is super important information. Getting to the point of misaligned indulgence is not what we're aiming for. We are aiming for really retrieving the core needs beneath the stories, the limitations, the trauma patterns, etc. So, nonviolent communication is a tool that is really good for articulating and identifying needs and sharing it with others. So, I want to teach this. And I also want to teach that this is not universal. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a bit. The goal here is not to communicate with nonviolent communication all the time. Certainly, it would be lovely if we could nonviolently communicate all the time. But nonviolent communication as a technique definitely has its uses. I don't think you should be trying to talk in it 24/7. We're human and we're meant to have emotions and we're meant to be imperfect and we're meant to stumble over our words sometimes. But when we're really struggling and we don't even have a beginning place to start, nonviolent communication can be a great tool. So most of us end up making making life a little chaotic for ourselves, whether intended or not, because often we jump straight from feeling hurt to making a demand without ever naming the underlying need. Like we haven't even identified the underlying need. We just tell someone we need them to do something, we tell them not to do something. When we lead with an actual need, we've identified what's actually at the root, they have a better chance of hearing humanity. Because if we make a demand, whether intentional or not, the other person hears criticism, they hear control, it does not go over well. That is what nonviolent communication was ultimately created for, was to help create a framework for communicating our needs to others and making requests of them. So going back to that request piece. So there is a 4-step framework for NVC, and it's for really slowing our communication down and coming from a request instead of a demand. So first we state an observation of what actually happened. This is without interpretation or story. It is literally what a person outside with a movie camera could record on camera. So the camera can't pick up anything on the inside of any people involved. It can't pick up on emotions, underlying intentions, anything like that. Only what is observable. So, for example, it is observable if someone shuts a door in a way that's really loud, that causes a slam sound. Can we reasonably say if all we saw and heard was the door shut really loud? Can we say for sure whether they were angry? Can we say for sure whether they were deliberately slamming the door? No, we can't. The door could have gotten blown shut by a gust of wind for all we know. So we observe what we can actually observe without interpretation or story. Then there's the feeling. This is the thing that arises in us emotionally: sadness, rage, despair, upset. It's an emotion that arises within us. A need, the underlying need that's connected to that feeling. Sometimes NVC describes this as your value. So a lot of your needs and values use the same word. Like I said earlier, like it's usually a short sort of word or phrase that communicates a core idea, concept. So the need that's connected to that feeling, and then a request. What are you specifically asking of the other person to meet you? So, as an example, first off, speaking from I means that we're taking responsibility for our experiences rather than making other people responsible for us. Now, there's a way that we can absolutely end up still making other people responsible, even if we're using I statements. So that's why we want to be careful. We want to get into the nuance. But really important distinction: a request allows the other person to say no, a demand punishes them for saying no. Ideally, we never want to punish someone for exercising their right to consent, right? But there are certainly people out there that do. And that's why it's important. A lot of us are resistant to requests because they're being framed as demands, and that brings up past traumas. In some cases, a request shuts us down automatically because requests in the past may have led to ballooning out of control, right? There can be so many different numbers of things. But we need to reclaim the request and remember we and other people should have the right to say no. So again, I center my experiences, I make requests, and I allow other people and myself to say no. So, just to kind of give you an example of what nonviolent communication might look like, and I'll try to come up with a couple more examples off the top of my head. You never listen to me might look something like, when I'm sharing something important and I notice that you're looking at your phone, I feel really unseen. I value connection, or I need connection. Would you be willing to put your phone away temporarily when I'm sharing vulnerable things? Again, the other person can say yes or no to this. No, I'm going to keep my phone out. No, I don't want to talk to you, right? But it's not a demand. Now, if you are with somebody and they don't want to pay any attention to you, and they won't put their phone away, that's really great information that your boundaries might need to be exerted, and you might need to exit that situation because you can't control the other person. But you can ask them to meet you where you need and see how they respond. So let me come up with another example. Um, I'll use the dishes. Oh, have we all had a roommate or a partner or even a teen, right? That was not doing the dishes, and that was the agreement. Hey, when I notice that the dishes are undone and we had an agreement that you would do them on Tuesday, I feel a little frustrated. I really value agreements and commitments. And again, value and need can be um, sort of interchangeable here. So sometimes value makes more sense. I really, I have a need for cleanliness, or I have a need for communication, for clear communication. So depending on how you are going about this, right? Your request might be, would you be willing to do the dishes right now? Or would you be willing to communicate with me in the future if you can't get your dishes done on the day that was yours? Or something like that. Are you willing to swap days with me? Are you willing to tell me a little bit more about what would make you successful in getting the dishes done? So often when we're making our request, it's a request to be heard, a request for action, a request for more information, a request to give someone else more information, etc. But again, it's a request. There's consent involved. So just to recap, our 4 steps are: you make your observation. It's not when you were a little shit and didn't do the dishes, right? It's, I noticed that you did not do the dishes on Tuesday like you had agreed, and I feel a little frustrated, or I feel confused because I need clear communication. So, are you willing to let me know what's going on and why you weren't able to do the dishes on Tuesday like you agreed? Just these 4 steps, thinking through these about our scenarios, our situations that we find ourselves in, can really, really help get to the core of what we might need to communicate with someone else. So, both and thinking, um, we really want to be more in the both and instead of sort of the either or. And when it comes to conflicting needs, that can be tough. It's true that our needs and others' needs don't always line up. They might not line up in ourselves even sometimes. For example, you might need rest and also need to meet a deadline. That was me literally for the last 6 months trying to sell my house. I needed rest, and I also had deadlines to meet with contracts and contractors and paperwork and all of that. So I had to push at times, or I'd be making the choice to sacrifice moving the sale of my house forward, right? So you might have a need that goes against a responsibility, and you might have a need that you have no idea how to meet. You might have a need that literally goes against something else you are trying to achieve. These are all invitations to be in the both and. How can I meet my deadline and meet my need for rest? How can I be in the both and? Your partner might need space when you need connection. That's a mismatch in between you and another person. So if they need space, you can't force yourself upon them, or it's going to cause chaos and resentment and all that other stuff we've been talking about. So instead, can you plan for a future time of connection? Where can you meet in the middle? How can your partner get their space and you also meet your need for connection? This would be a great opportunity to go spend time with friends or other loved ones, right? Both and thinking really looks for solutions that honor multiple needs simultaneously rather than forcing there to be a winner where only one person gets their needs met. And it can be really tough for us to embrace this, but it is important to note that needs between people can be in conflict, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the needs are permanently incompatible. Sometimes we get this like, oh no, it means we're incompatible and I need to change everything. Compromise can be achieved as long as it still allows the needs of everyone to be met. If you have drastically different needs from people in your life, and this is a consistent thing that's coming up, that's a whole other story. But if you are finding yourself able to be in the both and being able to meet in the middle, being able to have your needs met approximately as often as other people's are met, then you're probably okay and you don't have to burn it all to the ground. Now, I wanted to briefly mention this today. I'm not going to give any specific examples, but nonviolent communication, for example, is a tool. It's not a universal truth. There is no universal communication method, really, that could be universally experienced across all peoples and cultures. So I just want to let you know there is direct versus indirect communication, and styles differ across cultures. Technically, neither is more correct, but it is important to come to an understanding of how you are communicating. Because if people can't communicate and understand one another, there is the problem. How needs are communicated, how conflict is navigated, and how requests are framed all carry cultural context. And it's important to understand the context in which you are communicating. In some cultures, for example, naming individual needs can feel really confrontational or selfish. Now, I am not here to be the white lady that says this is wrong and bad and it needs to be undone. I really honor cultures all across the world that have their different communication needs. And I acknowledge communal and relational cultures may navigate needs through different channels than what we are even aware of in Western culture. There is no one right way to communicate, but the goal is the awareness of your own lens. And what I want to say is that there absolutely is a truth that there is harmful communication. And this is where I'm not pointing to a specific culture, a specific person, a specific thing. I am saying let's have cultural humility for cross cultural ways of communicating and also be willing to say something, question something if legitimate harm is being done in the communication between peoples. So we want to approach all communication the same with the same level of cultural humility, deferring to the person in front of us, deferring to someone else's way of upbringing or whatever else to understand their context. And we want to call out harm. So don't instantly perceive other communication styles as harm, but if someone is actually doing harm, like you know, we know what trauma looks like. We know what abuse looks like. And that is where I say, let's stand up. Otherwise, cultural humility, please. Now, the biggest, hardest part of this all, having the courage to actually voice our needs. So you've done the work, you've gone in, you've excavated them. You know your need, but knowing your need and actually saying it out loud is a completely different thing. And I get this. I get this very on every single personal level. Voicing needs gets hard because old wounds taught us that asking leads to rejection. We might fear being too much. We might fear not being enough. Conditioning might say that our needs are less important than keeping the peace or getting the job done or keeping the family happy or whatever it might look like. It can be very hard to voice our needs. So, what helps us make it possible? Well, establishing safety within yourself to create safety for yourself, the safety in your relationships. If you do not feel safe in your relationships, is that based on prior wounding? Or is the relationship that's currently in front of you not able to meet you with open communication, with a sense of safety and dignity and respect? Safety is something that feels very out of reach if you're a trauma survivor, and I understand that too. So that is where the safety starts within ourselves. So getting anchored into I'm with me, I stand up for myself, I show up for my emotions. I don't shelve them permanently until they get suppressed. I shelve them and then I bring them back out. This is how we create safety, is by showing up for ourselves again and again and creating and co-creating safe spaces with others. This is a practice, right? This is a skill that we hone over time, saying, I need XYZ. Would you be willing to meet me here? I have this need for this. Am I willing to meet that need by sitting with it in my discomfort to figure out what I need? The practice of continuing to return to our needs again and again and again. And again, self trust, trusting yourself to be with the hard parts of voicing your needs, trusting yourself to show up for the parts of you that have needs that need to be shared. Your needs are important. Again, it can be really challenging to voice them. And it is the most important shadow work you can do, because this is how you get back to living the life that's yours, that you feel empowered in, that you feel excited to live in. And of course, consent. We've talked a little bit about it today, but I just want to leave us with this note that asking clearly for what you want and honoring others' no as fully as you want your no to be honored is key to consent. As a very important reminder, as we really start to look at our needs, a boundary is what you will or won't do. A request is what you are asking of someone else in response to a boundary. I've used the example of loud noises before. Hey, I'm not willing to stay in loud environments. I will not put up with loud environments. Uh, I have a need for calm and for peace. Would you be willing to ensure that you close doors extra quietly when you're leaving? Are you willing to not play loud music after a certain time, right? Whatever that might look like. But your boundary is what you will or won't do. And then you make the request of others. And if others can't meet the request, you may need to exert your boundary and abscond. As uncomfortable as that is. And that is why that self trust is so important, that you will stand up for yourself. And remember, both require clarity. Like, you need to have clarity about your boundary, and you need to have clarity of what's actually realistic to ask of someone else to meet you there. Both of these also require respect for other people's autonomy and your willingness to still meet your own needs and protect your own boundaries. So, a boundary is only as good as you are strong in being willing to uphold it. If you're like, I won't put up with abuse, and then you are sitting there allowing it to continue when you have the means to leave, when you have the means to leave, that's you violating your own boundary at that point. Because if you're saying, I won't put up with this, and then you are putting up with it, that is not you meeting your own standards. It's not you meeting your own boundaries. It's not you meeting your own needs. So remember that you are ultimately responsible for yourself. And you can voice your needs without making anyone else responsible for fulfilling them. So if you're sharing, I have this need, you're not automatically placing it on someone else to fulfill it. You're communicating to let them know it's a need, to see if you can come to a way to meet it together. And last but not least, remember that someone saying no to your request does not mean your need is wrong. It means that that particular pathway is not available and another path is needed. How do you meet that path? With honesty, integrity, communication, consent, all of the things that you need for yourself and to be in happy relationship with others. It might be no now, but it might be yes in the future. We don't want to pressure people to change their mind, but in many cases, something that we say yes to in one instance, we're going to say no to in another. So it is okay to ask again. It's okay to make another request. We just got to get good at hearing no. So let's take our moment to meditate here, to drop in and be for just a few moments. I'll just invite you to begin gently anchoring into the breath, being aware of yourself here and now, from head to toe, and see if you breathe here, if you can just invite in some gentle compassion, almost like liquid love washing from head to toe. We've dropped into shadows just to sit in the shadow. And today we're going to drop back into the shadow, dropping like a stone all the way from the thinking mind down deep into the core of the body. So breathing and drifting down into the core of your body. And as you breathe and as you drift, just gently inviting awareness here, awareness of something that you have as an underlying need, a need for rest, expression, play, nourishment, a need for creativity or connection. Whatever arises for you, whatever catches your attention first, what need is here for you to sit with? And just see if you can place that need in front of you, almost like an object, a symbol, or maybe even a part of you. Maybe it's a particular part of you that has that need. However, this shows up, we're just going to place that need in front of us so we can really witness it, and just notice what we notice. And just breathe here. What is this need stemming from? Is it a basic need? A regular, everyday human need? Or is this more of a soul calling need? Is it something a little bit more unique to you? No right or wrong, just observing what need is here. And then just asking the question, allowing whatever answers surface to surface. How can I meet this need? How can I meet this need? Are there any requests I'd like to make of others to help me meet this need? Are there any requests I'd like to make of others? And then dismissing that, letting go of the questions. Invite you to step into a timeline where this need has been fully met. It's being routinely met. You are feeling fulfilled in the meeting of this need. What's changed? How are you showing up differently? How are you communicating differently? Take a moment to energetically sense and integrate what it feels like for this need to be deeply met. And breathe that in and allow it to radiate out to every cell of your being. And just affirming, I can meet my own needs. My needs are sacred. My needs are important information. I deserve to have my needs met. I am willing to meet my own needs. And then gently releasing this practice too, coming back into awareness of the body, of the breath, giving yourself permission to come back anytime to listen to your needs within. And then if the eyes are not already open, gently blinking them open. Taking some moments to look around your space. So, your invitations for this week, my friend. To consider your own pillars of need, such as the physical, emotional, spiritual, and creative we talked about earlier. What needs feel present and resourced, and what have been maybe suppressed or neglected. Pleasure mapping, maybe identify desires or pleasures that went underground, things that you shoved away for whatever reason. What feels good that you've allowed yourself or stopped allowing yourself to enjoy? What feels good that you've stopped allowing yourself to enjoy? Checking in on your shelving. Where have you been telling yourself that you're setting aside something for later, but then that later never comes? Those are the parts of you to give immediate attention to know that you see them, that you love them, that you're supporting them. And then finally, reflect maybe on what has kept or what needs you've been keeping in the dark, maybe what's been keeping them in the dark, but what would it take to ask for, either from yourself or from someone else for that need to be met? So, however you choose to go about this, the invitation is simply to be in relationship with your needs, to get to know them a little bit more. So, in our next episode, we turn away from shadow into light. We'll talk about what aligned light actually is and what it is not, because a lot of people think that the light is always good. It is not. We'll talk about self care as the practice of tending your light rather than performing, more of that like performative wellness, and why light without shadow is ultimately a performance. These are really the last two episodes of what makes shadow and light what it is. And then last three, because we'll really get into the shadow light dance, my favorite thing. But as I leave you today with the shadow arc, your shadow and your needs, I want you to remember there are so many gems, so many gifts, so much gold in the shadows. And down there is the sensuous underbelly of the light, where our needs, our desires, our dreams live. So give yourself permission to be human, to have wants and needs and desires and dreams and goals and all of the above, knowing that when you can make spaciousness for them, when you can make spaciousness for the reality that's not yet manifested, when you can allow yourself the room to dive down in and excavate things from the shadows, bringing them to the light, you can do literally anything. So don't be afraid of the shadow, my friends. It is not so scary. It's actually quite empowering. And when we can start to identify and articulate our needs out in the world, again, anything is possible. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, I will be back again next time and we will kick off our light arc, which is really our last full arc of this entire series. So thanks for being here with me. Know that I see you, I believe in you, and as always, I'm cheering you on. Until next time, my friends. Bye for now.